You're listening to the Digital Deep Dive, where we tackle the newest trends, strategies, and pain points shaping growth across the digital landscape. From Amazon and D2C to international expansion, join our host and e-commerce leaders across multiple industries for in-depth discussions on how to maximize your brands in the digital arena. Now, here's your host, Aaron Conant.
Well, hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Digital Deep Dive podcast. I'm your host, Aaron Conant, and today we're going to talk about commerce everywhere. I don't think anybody, doesn't realize at this point in time the importance in the blending of offline and online, but also how it blends into media as well. And how do we look at media and paid media across the board? And so just had a lot of great conversations recently with Tamara Alesi over at Mediaplus. Tam, thanks for jumping on today. I'll kind of kick it over to you, a brief intro on yourself and Mediaplus, and then we'll jump into the conversation. Sound good?
Perfect. Hi, everybody. I'm Tamara Alesi. Nice to meet you all. I'm CEO of Mediaplus. In the U.S., we're a boutique agency, but funny enough, globally, we're the largest independent. And I often joke we're the boutique with the backbone of a giant, because my giant is 5,500 people strong across 18 countries, and just has an amazing independence and group of very smart people who help drive brand growth. So that's where I'm at and who I am.
Yeah. So really quick, before we jump into this commerce everywhere, I would say then media everywhere as well. So interesting that it's completely independent at this point in time and being that big, because that everybody over the past couple of years seems to have been gobbled up, right, by the big, holding companies that are out there. It's pretty cool that you're still independent.
Yeah, our owners, the Haller family, and Florian Haller, who's he's our top commander. Amazing people. Like I spend a lot of time in Germany where our headquarters are. I spend a lot of time with the teams from around the world, and it doesn't surprise me that I gravitated to Mediaplus and to Service Plan Group, because Florian he's uber creative. He has a perspective that we're not here to just be bulk buyers, but we're here to really help brands grow. So all of his initiatives are focused on how are we the best partner? How do we help brands grow? How do we help them manage commerce everywhere? How do we think about not just the changing media landscape, because Mediaplus is part of our group, but we also have Service Plan, which is our creative arm. We have Planet, which is our end-to-end digital group. And so it's really a holistic system where we can support our partners across the board. Globally, we see that work come to life with the likes of BMW, with Siemens, with DeLonghi, with all these amazing brands. But I love the independence, because, at the end of the day, Aaron, we're not accountable to a board that's worried about their cut of the profit. Like, we're accountable to ourselves as owners of the business, and it's quite different.
Yeah, it is. I mean, it's just I'm rooting for you to stay independent. Just from the standpoint, I've seen it, as these agencies, and they're fantastic, and they get acquired. After an earnout happens, and after that original founder and the founder passion leaves, a lot of agencies lose that edge. And that's where I think there's a lot of brands right now that I'm talking with are kind of frustrated with where they're currently at with their agency. And it's not, it's just the natural thing that happens is the founder, the person who put in the 80 hours a week for, 8 to 10 years, they're the earnout, and now they're taking a break. And that passion is no longer there. And you're right, it's a focus on, sometimes they become publicly traded, part of those companies, and it's earnings calls and profit margins rather than, hey, how can I help brands grow? So anyways, as you're saying that, it was just hitting me because it's something that a lot of brands are going through right now is, hey, what's going on with my agency? And they used to be amazing, and now they're just really good. But I want amazing again.
And I think that I just, to cap that off, I think that's about passion. If my mission, and I talk about it quite openly, is I want to be the partner that everybody loves to work with. And that's my talent, that's our client brands, that's our publishing community, because that's ultimately like the trifecta that makes our whole world go round. And without it, you can't deliver great work. And you're so right. By the way, I've worked for almost every one of those holding companies, and I've had great experiences and I've learned so much. But all I hear, even from friends within those walls, they're like, the passion is deflated. And I want, when everybody's like working with us and we're collaborating, like all I want is passion. I just want like the passion that drives the result. And that's what we're pushing for at Mediaplus and what I hope we deliver every day for our partners.
Yeah. I mean, I'm sure you are. I mean, you can, just our conversations, I can feel the passion, which is exactly, you're right. That's what brands are looking for. They're excited. It's their brand. They want to grow and they want partners who are going to be on board and be excited, not just be another cog in the giant machine that's, helping contribute to overall media spend and therefore profits. So that's a fun side note. So now, what I like to bring it up is around the commerce everywhere conundrum. Right, as we rapidly went, and I'll say really over the past 5 years, and I know e-com started a long time, everybody's been buying online, but everybody knows that with COVID, it really pushed a larger portion of the demographic into purchasing, into different purchasing behaviors, and being more comfortable doing more things online, even things that we thought, not necessarily people would really, really want to jump into in an older demographic of healthcare or finances. And so across the board, everybody's dealing with this. And now we're at a point where people, in some cases, really want to buy in store. In some cases, really want to buy online. Sometimes they want to see it in the store and buy online, or see it online and buy it in the store. Like, I'd love to just kind of walk down this path of how you view it as a whole, this commerce everywhere.
It's interesting. All of our clients have retail that's both online as well as within a retail footprint. One of our, I think the reality is that consumers today, they want two things. They often want easy, like remember the Staples button? Did I just age us? They want easy and they want now. And so I think the responsibility of anybody who's selling to check those two boxes. And the reality is, and we talk about this with our partners all the time, you're always going to make the biggest margins on your own e-commerce, in your own storefront. You're always going to make the biggest margin. However, consumers intuitively, like, they have a Amazon Prime membership, so they shop for so much shit on Amazon Prime. And so, you need to be there, because if you want to grow your market share, you need to capture the intent that is there. However, there's some people, not like me, I buy all my groceries online, even now that I live in Connecticut. But there's some people who love going into their Trader Joe's, or they love going into their Kroger's, or they love going into their Stu Leonard's, wherever it is. And they just want to literally pick every one of those products off the shelf. So I think that brands that are going to be successful in today's marketplace, they have to think through the lens of commerce everywhere. And how am I adapting my strategy to not just be there so a consumer can see me, because there's a lot of noise, but ultimately, how do I trigger a transaction? And, even yesterday, I don't know if you TikTok, Aaron.
No, I've addicted a personality. And I had it briefly, and I always have it briefly, and then I realize it just sucked away an hour of my time. So I have to remove it. As the CEO of a media agency, I find it's my responsibility that I have to participate in every commerce channel, in every media channel. So I have a TikTok account. It's public, Tamara Alesi. But I'm like, I like mess around. I almost cursed on your show, but I do gardening and cooking on it. But yesterday, I got a little window that said that I can activate as a seller on TikTok. And I was like, what's this about? And I don't know if you've seen the trade recently, but TikTok is actually like in the process
of blocking leak outs to Amazon. They're trying to control commerce in their environment so that you are purchasing within that walled garden. And it's smart of TikTok. They've totally accelerated their advertising platform. I mean, now if you're on there, you see an ad like right when you go into the platform, and it's not intrusive. You can swipe it up. It's fine, but they are pushing hard to keep that commerce environment there, because the reality is, like, people now don't just search on Google, and they certainly don't just search on Amazon. Like, if you're under the age of 35, like, your first search is in TikTok, whether you're looking for a restaurant, whether you're looking for advice, whether you're looking for that shirt you want to buy. TikTok has turned, it's a search engine. It's not a social platform. And so I think it's interesting that brands really need to think hard about, what is my commerce everywhere strategy? Where should I prioritize first? Like, where am I getting the biggest share of commerce? And literally have a waterfall effect. It has to be your own .com. It likely includes Amazon, even if it's just a few products to like capture intent. And then, what are the other channels that I'm choosing to be in? For DeLonghi, it's a client of ours. We're, in Williams Sonoma, we're in Crate and Barrel, we're in Best Buy, we're like Costco, we're everywhere. But an Amazon strategy for them is significant because it's important to us. It's important to our customers. And sometimes we sacrifice our own .com inventory to make sure that we're fulfilling what we need to in all of those places.
Well, I mean, you have to. I mean, what I hear right now from a lot of brands, so a couple thoughts. So one thing I hear from a brands are the need to simplify. So over the course of the past few years, they've realized they need help in all these different areas. There's not enough talent, or they can't afford enough talent because everybody's salaries went through the roof, and they need a place for content. They need a place for offsite. They need a site for paid agency. We'll say for paid search and social, and Amazon agency. Like, it's just, there's so many that they're like, okay, wait, I'm spending 15 hours a week talking to agencies. Like, how can I trim this down to like 2 or maybe 1? Maybe you can, maybe you can't. But that kind of what you're talking about is you have to look at that holistic strategy and where's the money going. And sometimes they do conflict, right? Are you driving to Amazon, or are you driving to your direct to consumer site? And where we get to an agencies that can handle both, they significantly are going to have an advantage over the coming years, because people, as we look at overall profitability, which they are more and more on a unit by unit basis, they want to send it to the platform that's going to make the most money. And that's where they're going to drive the majority of the paid media. And we all know, like with Amazon, that goes back and forth, right? Based on shipping rates, your direct to consumer site could go back and forth on certain products.
Yeah.
And so that's interesting. But the other one is just anyways, I'll pause there. I don't know if you have thoughts on that, but then I want to just go back to TikTok quickly.
Yeah, no, first of all, you're right, like on the money. There was a point in my career that I pivoted. I thought, oh my God, if I'm going to really ever be in this role, I need to leave the agency world and get behind, the client curtain. And so I went over to Birchbox as head of marketing. And that year of my life, I often talk about it as my working MBA, was the best year because one, Birchbox was kind of like one of the first D2C brands, like direct to consumer brands that like created this subscription box and like, had this whole model. But they got on that flywheel, where the Google, the Meta flywheel, where, we're delivering great results until we're not. Mm-hmm. And so they brought me in at a point where we had to think about, well, how do we tackle, this? How do we ensure that we don't just have to give away product to make money? And it taught me so much. It taught me about like lifetime value. It taught me about like, how to deliver positive CAC. Like it taught me all of these things that my clients weren't necessarily talking to me as an agency partner, not because they didn't trust me, but because that was in their world, in their mind. So now when we're helping brands think about how do you tackle commerce everywhere, we're not just talking about media metrics. We're not talking about impressions, clicks, and click-through rate. I mean, of course, we talk about those things, but we're talking about what is your profitability goal? What is your share of market goal? Like, what are your targets in terms of like lifetime value? Like all of these things that are super important, because you can't have one without the other. And you can't fix that flywheel if you're not including your partners in the discussion about like your business results. And so I think we take a very different approach, because we really, if one of my clients was sitting here on the call with us, I think they would tell you, like, we're truly like business partners. We're not just media buyers. And I think, when we talk about how do you solve for a commerce like everywhere, need, it's having a business partner at the table with you, not just thinking about, oh, how am I going to spend your money?
Yeah, I think that it's that changed the way of, how people need to view their agency as a whole. And I totally agree. I mean, it is different than it's been in the past few years, right? It used to be acquisition at all cost, including no profit margin, right? Or negative profit margin, right? We've seen companies explode, right? Because they're actually taping $10 to everything they ship out the door, right? It's like standing outside the door saying, hey, here's $110 to go buy a $100 pair of shoes.
Yeah.
But it works in an environment short term that's an investment driven, easy money environment.
Yeah.
But the long term play to profitability, if you have that in, but if you have that in your business plan, but at this point in time, it's a different environment than it was 2, 3, 4 years ago. And
amazing way.
Profitability is what everybody's looking at. I mean, we looked at what even Amazon's totally focused on profitability now, even on the 1P side. The other thing that I wanted to bring up was just in regards to TikTok, which is like really interesting that you're saying that it's a search engine, because, and I totally agree. But it's this idea that a lot of brands view TikTok and a lot of organizations as just a social media play. It's just a bunch of, different clicks, just putting little micro reels of their own, little silly antics out there. And that's not it anymore, right? It started off that way, right? But it's not anymore. And the TikTok that we saw a year ago is different than the TikTok we see today. And it's going to be different than the one we see a year from now. And that constant
not a year from now, a month from now. Like the rate in which TikTok's platform evolves is insane. And it's funny, for me, it started kind of just as, curiosity. Again, like as a CEO, when my clients ask me, well, should I be there? If I'm not there, how do I give them the answer, right? So, and I have a 12-year-old, so the last thing I want her to do is like doom scrolling on TikTok. Like, and that's what a 12-year-old does. They absolutely that's their mindset. But for brands, it's do I jump in and play? Because we actually have a travel client that we work with. We strategically advise them on kind of their approach to how they're tackling media and growth. And, they were like, God, a lot of our, partners want us to be on TikTok. They want us advertising there. And I'm like, you actually don't need to be yet, because there's so many people on this platform talking about you organically in a positive way. That's your best voice in this environment right now. You should be prioritizing your first dollar in search when, like in the Google environment, when people are seeking, like, where do I need to stay on this vacation? You should be investing your second dollar. So we actually have literally a waterfall calculator where we help brands look at, where's my revenue? Where's the sales coming in from? Where's my profit margin? And we have an entire waterfall calculator that we've created to help them identify how they really prioritize. Because the reality is, if a brand is, P&G and spending billions of dollars, they have a much different approach. They just want reach. They want to be top of mind every time somebody's shopping for one of their products. But when you have a smaller brand, a D2C brand that has $500,000 for a year to spend in advertising, and that can make or break whether they get their next round of funding, you need to be really strategic on where that first dollar goes and how you're additive. And I think that that's the most important part of like how you tackle commerce everywhere, because only 10% of brands are like the P&Gs of the world. 90% of brands are having to constrict their marketing budgets. Like they're still dealing with the reels of, frankly, like supply and demand that is a after effect of COVID. Like everybody hasn't caught up. And so, there's 50% of brands that spend less than $10 million in advertising a year. And frankly, there's even a bigger group that only has, $2 million or less to spend. So how do you help those brands, be super smart and super focused with that investment? So, and I know you and I both talk about like brand formance, I think is how we would say it these days. But how do you help brands understand, like, let's make sure we're fueling your flywheels so that you're getting the results you need. But what are you going to invest to actually keep fueling that performance? Because the performance, if you just do performance, it peters out. It like goes away. So you have to have a system. You have yin and yang that fuels the top while keeping consumers purchasing on the bottom.
Yeah, I mean, but what's that balance then? Like when you engage like with a new brand, what is there an audit? Like as people sit back, like one of the purpose of this podcast, what I love to capture is these little nuggets that people can take away and they can go through and say, okay, if I do these 5 steps, I at least understand, maybe it's 3 steps, at least I understand my brand a little better coming out of this. So what, is there like an audit that you do? Is there things that you walk through? Is it a complete brand evaluation?
Oh my God, I love that you asked me that question, because I actually don't think in all of our conversations we've ever talked about this. So there is. I need to TM it. I joke. We call it the 3 C's, and it's an understanding audit. It starts with curiosity. It starts with understanding, and it's about, understanding the category that we're talking about. It's a deep dive into the consumer. Who are they? What are they about? What gets them? Like, what are their trigger points? Like, how do you, like, what's the lens you need to look through for that consumer? And then consumption, like where is, what's the media of choice, so to speak, that actually speaks to them? Like, how do you capture, that consumption? How do you capture that consideration? And that audit is everything. That's often how we win a pitch without a pitch, because we're willing to make the commitment. I don't think you can work for a brand until you've fully done an amazing amount of understanding about who they are, like the marketplace they're competing in, the consumer that they have, and why they're different. And we often, through that discovery, help brands realize, like, oh, I didn't even think that was part of who I should be speaking to. Like they don't realize, because they don't have the tools that we have to help them find that out. So we absolutely, the 3 C's, it's our understanding process. And it's important.
How many times do their brains like break open? Right? Because there's this different, like, I mean, and this is nothing against, the digital marketer, the brand manager of today, because they're asked to do so much more than they were ever trained for. Than they were ever expected 5 years ago. And now they have these huge budgets. There's new platforms all the time. All the current platforms they're on, like we talked about, they're always changing, right? There's new tech partners, there's new tools, there's new strategic partners, like everything's swirling around them. I can see at a point where like they're just so exhausted. Like, I just need to keep running the race. It's like the marathon, right? Just keep the head down. I just got to finish. But it's not 26.2 miles. It's like 26.2 thousand miles. So they're never going to get there. So it's just in this constant heads down plotting mode where I guess how often is it you step in and they're like, well, I never thought of that, right? Is it, 1 time out of 10? Is it 10 times out of 10?
It happens a lot. And I'd like to believe I'm like, I want to be the agency everybody loves to work with. Like, those are the surprises and the delights that we provide all the time. Like, That's, I think, why we have a seat at the table with our partners, because they're like, holy fuck, like we wouldn't have figured that out by ourselves. And, we work with a brand called American Specialty Health, and their CMO, Lori Lentz, she's awesome. And she got introduced to me because we used to handle the HP business at some point in my journey. And she was an old HPer, and a friend connected us. And, Lori is like, the team helped us see the business through a different lens. Like they were so kind of stuck in their own world, and they unintentionally had their own blinders on, that like we just helped them think a little bit different about how to like, what was their true competitive base? Like who do they really need to think about as competitors? Like who is their true consumer? Especially like their whole product is about incentivizing health and helping people get back to the gym. And coming out of COVID, God, think about how disruptive that whole marketplace was. And then, what are the behaviors that are triggers for them to actually see a result? So we often, there's kind of three things we think about when we're managing this constant change. And it's like, let's think less about reach and think about relevance. That audit you asked me about, like, how do we kind of put our hands around and get a deep understanding of, the category, the consumer and consumption, so that it's the foundation for how we plan. That foundation changes all the time, but what's that foundation? When I see agencies talking about, oh, we're predictive, it's like, enough already. You need to move from predictive to adaptive. And that's because plans change, and we need to plan for that. So it's not about being predictive, because God, like, who predicted on March 20th of, 2021 that we were all going to be sent home and we weren't going to leave our homes for a fucking month? Like, who would have predicted that? Nobody would have predicted that. So we need to be adaptive, and we need to, I think, like, build learning engines that like have adaptability front and center, so that like when it comes to business outcomes, we're not just winning in the short term, but we're winning in the long term. And that's super important for all those D2C brands we're always talking about. And then thinking less about channels. Like, do I need to be in TV? Do I need to be in print? Do I need to be in radio? Do I need to be in search, social, whatever it is? And actually thinking about consumer behaviors. So how do I capture intent while people watch? Whether they're watching on their big screen at home, whether they're watching YouTube on their computer, or whether they're watching on TikTok. Like, how do I capture intent while they watch, why they listen, why they read? And thinking about it that way, behaviors are consistent, but the channels in which consumers consume, they change all the time. So if you plan for behaviors, you're more likely to capture more of that intent and drive better results. So, that's kind of a focus that we take, because it is uber important, because tackling commerce everywhere, it's a hard chore. And I'd like to think we need to have value so that we have that seat at the table with our partners.
Well, yeah, I mean, when you think about commerce everywhere, then people think media everywhere. And yes, and maybe no, right?
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, brands really need to be able to justify if they didn't hit a number, and like, well, why weren't you on TikTok? Or why didn't you do print? Or why didn't you do streaming TV? They have to have that strong plan and that strong story behind, like, hey, here's the reality. And what's tough for a brand, just a brand and a brand manager or a marketer, e-commerce team, whoever it might be, is, they're just so busy in the day-to-day to pop your head up and do the strategic planning, and then to not have anybody else to rely on is really tough. But again, it's kind of like where you're saying, it's like the agencies that are going to win are the ones that are going to evolve to these new needs that brands have. And it's not just buying media.
Yeah.
Right. It's not just performance marketing. We've had this conversation, like people say performance marketing and they just kind of blanket out there for all paid media. And no.
It's I mean, sad to say, they're kind of right. Like, but it's this, you know, I think in a way everything is performance, even brand. And the reason that is because customers don't differentiate. Like, you know, we might have a brand ad for a client that's running on air or running in out of home or wherever it might be. And then we might have performance ads that are, you know, running on Meta. And we have brand ads running on Meta too. But in the end of the day, Erin, if you see one of those ads, you're not thinking, oh, is that a performance ad or is that a brand ad? Like, as a consumer, you see a product, if the ad is done well, that you're like, I want to fucking buy that. Or you're like, not interested. But like, the goal of advertising is to pique a consumer's curiosity. And so they ultimately do consider you as a purchase, and that you do motivate them to want that. You know, DeLonghi is a client of mine, and if you don't know what they do, they make really beautiful coffee machines that have, I literally can't buy a Starbucks coffee anymore because it just tastes like garbage compared to like having this bean to cup experience that I have with my machine. And it's, you know, advertising is important, but we often talk about, like, at the table, where like it's experiencing the product that is what makes it truly a must buy. And I have one in my home, and my friends come over.
I told you mine just died after 20,000 cups.
We're going to send you a machine.
20,000 cups. It was a fully automatic. You just hit the button, it grinds it. Yes, go. I totally agree. You can't go to the
you have this cup and you're like, wow. And my clients gave me like this sheet of codes. They're like, Tim, you've sold more of our machines by just having friends in here because it's experiencing it. But our advertising is out there reminding them and helping people see. And, you know, we actually, they launched a coffee machine in a very cluttered marketplace back in March. It's called True Brew. And the innovation was bean to cup for just a cup of coffee. And first of all, besides the quality of the coffee being the best thing you've ever had, it's super easy. And we couldn't keep that product on the shelf because people are seeing this. And then the reviews out there about why this is such an amazing machine. And, you know, it's a system, and the PR, it all works together. And the influencers, super important. Like, people who are out there and like, yes, I love this, and I'm going to talk about it all the time. So, you know, when I guess all of these things we've talked about are so important, but brands really need to think about, you know, how is paid media part of my overall system? Like, why we were so successful in the launch of that product. I mean, to a point where we couldn't keep the product on the shelf, and we couldn't keep our orders with our customer doors, like Williams-Sonoma and Crate & Barrel. We couldn't keep them fulfilled. So we were like literally taking our own commerce and filling those orders because it's that important to them. And it's like why I love, you know, DeLonghi as a partner is because they're willing to think that way. They're like, it's not just about paid media. It's about, you know, the influence we have in the market. It's about the PR strategy we have. It's about our customer relations with our retail doors, whether it be a Williams-Sonoma, Crate & Barrel, et cetera, inclusive of Amazon, super important to them. But it's that 360 view of an entire like marketing outreach system that makes it so much stronger and allows you to deliver on commerce everywhere in a really successful way.
Yeah. Awesome.
You're watching my passion just like.
Yeah, no, I love it. I mean, because I love what I do, and I love, you know, bringing people on who absolutely love what they do. I spend my days just helping brands with digital strategy and, you know, helping them with partner selection. And it's like a hobby at this point in time. It's not even a job. And then, you know, in a lot of evenings, we'll do 100 dinners this year. I'm moderating in-person events with the smartest digital people around. It's pretty cool. You know, and so I'm passionate about it. I love, you know, bringing people on that are just as passionate about what they do. I mean, I've been picking your brain for a while. Any questions you have for me, or any like other things that we didn't get to that you're like, hey, like, I really thought this was going to come up?
No, I think why I've enjoyed our conversation so much is because I think you are really rooted, not just in the agency landscape, but you're really rooted in the brand landscape. Like you have, brands coming to you to help them kind of solve like what's next. I mean, I'm curious from your perspective, like what are the three most important kind of trends you're hearing from these brand marketers about like their needs? Because people like me, like that's important as we think about how we help them.
Number one right now is probably staffing. There's kind of this middle layer that got stripped out. Part of me thinks that that's a readjustment of inflated salaries, or what these organizations thought were inflated salaries over the pandemic. I think those people will be hired back. So number one is just, hey, they don't have enough people. The next one, so again, how do you find the right partner, right? How do you find somebody that's going to do more than just buy media for you, but provide insights? The other thing is just the performance of all of it and the metrics and KPIs that they need to report back. So that included in there is then education of the executive team of what KPIs need to be looked at. And executive teams have been focused on just straight up ROAS because it's the easiest to understand, even though it's not the best metric. It's a metric. It's just not the one that you need to completely rely on across the board. Just straight up return on ad spend, like, is not a way to look at it. It's an oversimplistic way to look at it. So what are the KPIs and what are the newest KPIs and metrics? And then how do I communicate those to an executive team that doesn't necessarily understand what's going on? What are the individual issues people are trying to solve for? Well, as the customer acquisition costs go up, lifetime value of customers is huge. So how do we make sure that we increase conversion once we've driven them to the landing page? And that's everything from the checkout experience to the shipping experience to subscriptions. I mean, I don't know how many questions I have on subscriptions right now. You jump into that includes the loyalty side, reward side, like customer retention. That's what you want. You got them there. How do you get them to convert? And then how do you get them to convert again? So then you get into these upsell engines, and it's just, the problem is there's few people out there that understand all those pieces, and you can have a leader who can help splice it all out. Most times you have a digital marketer that's being asked to do the operations side, right? Or a digital operations person that's being asked to do the marketing side. And the teams aren't growing. They're just not. And I understand why, but I don't understand why. I understand, things start to slow down a little bit. They're hedging their bets. They want to, trim out to make sure they hit their EBITDA, especially if they've been acquired by PE, they got to turn in a year or two. What's the EBITDA you're trying to hit and profitability? But I also it's impeding long-term growth. It just is. And a lot of it is driven just by naivety at the executive team level, not understanding the complexities of everything that's going on. So it's just so different, because you asked me that question 3 years ago. I'm like, it's Amazon, right? It's profitability on Amazon. Should I use the new DSP platform? It was very, very, what seemed like it was hard at the time is super, super simplistic now. And the whole game's higher, and it's just so much harder than it used to be. And so, yeah, and now it's funny because right now we're hitting going into Q4. So also now we're entering the busiest time of the year, and everybody's asked for, FY24 numbers. So we don't even know how the busiest time of the year is going to perform, and you want me to predict next year?
And predictors, this is why I talk it needs to be adaptive versus predictive. The predictors are like a roller fucking coaster. What everybody's saying, whether it's Magna or Group M or whoever it is in terms of spend, it's up and down and up and down. it's like you can't predict that. You don't know. And I do agree with you, but that's why flexibility at the cornerstone of thinking about how you think about your brand. And I understand, like, especially if you have investors you have to be accountable to, like, they're going to want to know, well, what's our plans look like? It's important to lay down plans, but be like, look, these need to be adaptive, because guess what? The marketplace might not be what it was like pre-COVID again. Like
it's also hilarious when you have the brands and just hearing this and just living this actually is like, what is FY24 going to look like? And suppose you're a $2 million business. We'll go really serious. You're a $2 million business this year. Like, I don't know, I'll do 2.5. That's not good enough. All right, 2.7. Like, all the data shows 2.5, but you want 2.7? Not good enough. I don't know, 3. Go way too much. You go back. Just give me the number. Like, I'm going to work my butt off. The team's going to work their butt off. And if we can do 5, we'll do 5. But all the trends are showing 2.5. They're like, 3 is good. Okay. It's just a number at that point in time. And so those are some of the other things that are going on right now. Like, just give me a number. Let's give it to me, because I don't want to go, you already have it in your mind. Just write it down. And I'll sign off on it. Other things you're like excited about? I mean, I see we're getting close to the end of time, but I always like to ask people, like, hey, are there things that you're excited about or new things that are popping up?
Oh, God. So the thing I love most about what I do is that it does change all the time. Like, that makes it fun. I am not bored ever. Like, every single audit we do, every single brand we start an engagement with, every conversation we have, it literally is different. And I actually think being like, what excites me most is when people are curious and they lean into that change, because there's nothing worse than a marketer who thinks they should be doing the same thing today that they were doing a year ago or even 6 months ago. Like, the marketplace is changing, how consumers transact is changing. Like, the most special thing about what we do is that it's constantly evolving. And so it just makes it so fun. I am keeping a pulse on all this stuff with TikTok, because, I'm going to probably, like, after this post, I'm going to get some reach out from some people I know in the business that, about privacy and all those things, and be like, how can you be talking about that platform like that? Like, privacy, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, well, but Google does the same thing, and Facebook does the same thing, and, like, fucking site A, B, and C do the same thing. Like, they all do the same thing. So I think it's our job as, consultants, because ultimately, like, that's who we are to all of our partners, is to have an open mind and help them make the best decision with the facts, like the facts today. So what I'm most excited about in, like, what's going on is that we are always evolving and changing, and the openness of marketers to have, like, that realization too. Because I have worked with brands, and it's like, 60% of our budget needs to be in TV, and 20% needs to be in print, and 10% needs to be in out of home, and then the rest you can do that digital shit. Like, I've had those conversations, and there's nothing worse than kind of what I call, like, blind dictation, or the chairman, like, perspective, which is like, this is how I've always done it, so I'm going to fucking keep doing it this way.
Yeah.
I think, what excites me most is all the change, because that's what keeps this interesting. And that's why I do what I do. And I hope, like, everybody who works and collaborates with me, like, they feel the same. Like, that's what I want them to feel.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, Tam, this has been a blast, and I'm sure we'll put together another one. But with that, we're getting right here to time. And so we're going to wrap up this episode of the Digital Deep Dive. Thanks, everybody, for listening in. Thanks again, Tam. We'll see you.
Have a meeting.